In this lecture, we are going to cover procedures for decreasing problem behaviors. Before we start our unit on decreasing problem behaviors, I have a small disclaimer. Although I have learned the methods presented in this unit, I have no experience either implementing them or recommending them to the teachers I've supported as a coach. I've personally seen tragic results from the inappropriate or isolated use of these methods by educators. Using punishment is almost a reflex in education, and I believe it has a cultural background component as well. It is viewed as a reflex because it can be effective in reducing problem behaviors in that exact moment. It also potentially works as a negative reinforcer for the teachers because the behavior which is adversive to the classroom environment stops. Before we go any further, I would like to recommend a brief video by Amythest Schaber. She's 28 years old. She is an individual identified with the autism spectrum disorder and promotes autism awareness on YouTube. Schaber began their channel, Neuro Wonderful, out of a desire for autism to be perceived as something different from what they were typically seeing. And she says, I quote, "Much of this information was presented in a negative manner that made autism seem like it was something scary or tragic. I decided to fill in the gap." Although I do not agree with her complete stance on the use of ABA methodology, I feel that it's important to listen to a voice from someone who actually received the services so that we can consider all of the perspectives on it. So we are just going to watch a brief snapshot of her video. And if you have time, I hope that you will visit her channel to see what her perspective is on ABA therapy.
I want a renaissance to shine a light, be the change we want, set things right. We've been waiting in the dark for so long.
ABA stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. Currently, it is the go-to method for treating autism and is strongly encouraged from a very young age to teach autistic children socially acceptable behaviors and to help parents to stop or prevent behaviors that they don't particularly enjoy. The idea behind behavioral analysis is to take your subject and first you analyze what is prompting the behavior that you don't like. So say for an autistic child that would be hand flapping. And then the second step is to develop consequential strategies to prevent that behavior from occurring. So the idea is observe and then come up with analytical and scientific strategies to make sure that behavior doesn't happen anymore. How you make sure that behavior doesn't happen anymore, say hand flapping in an autistic child, is dependent upon the concept of operant conditioning. The operant being the autistic child, and conditioning being the use of reinforcement and punishment. I am strongly against the use of ABA therapy to treat autistic children. The idea behind ABA, the very core concept, is using the analysis of behavior, and you apply that analysis systematically to improve socially significant behavior. Some ABA therapists will say, well, you know, everybody has consequences to their actions. There are positive outcomes and negative outcomes. You can study hard for that test and pass, or you cannot study and fail. And those are behaviors and choices that you have to make. Now, the real problem that occurs when you try to treat autistic children with ABA therapy is, you know, what is socially significant behavior and who gets to say what is socially acceptable or not. The idea that autism needs treating at all is I think, inaccurate. The use of operant conditioning on children, especially on autistic children, is, to me, sickening, because autistic children don't need to be conditioned. There are some things that autistic children do need help with. There are many comorbid conditions that occur alongside autism, such as dyspraxia, sensory processing disorder, social anxiety, insomnia, speech impairments. All of these things do need help and treatment, but what doesn't need treatment is autistic behaviors. And that's entirely what ABA is about. It's right in the name, Applied Behavioral Analysis. ABA is all
Now we are going to cover hierarchy of procedural behavior reduction methods. When deciding upon what procedure should be used to reduce problem behaviors, certain principles should be taken into consideration. The first principle is level of intrusiveness. While the process of considering behavior reduction the least intrusive intervention is the least adversive, or the lowest on the hierarchy. Gast and Woolery suggest that if the choice of treatments is between procedures that are equally effective, then the least adversive or least intrusive should be selected. However, if the choice is between a least intrusive but ineffective procedure and a more adversive but effective procedure, then the effective procedure should be selected. There are times that a more intrusive method could be considered, especially if all positive behavior supports have been exhausted. However, these should be overseen by a team with extensive knowledge of behavior modification. For example, Fayette County has a team of BCBAs to assist the teachers. If you see any of these methods covered in this chapter in a classroom or within a school building, it is advisable to seek the behavior plan in place to ensure that the student's rights to a safe learning environment isn't being compromised, which could lead to psychological or physical harm. As a service provider, you have access to talking with the BCBAs to ask questions, and most of them welcome the opportunity. The second principle is that when possible, the intervention should be based on the identified function of the behavior. This ensures that an effective replacement behavior can be taught that will result in the student still receiving the same reinforcement as the inappropriate behavior we are trying to replace. In this lecture, We are going to cover levels 2 through 4. Level 1, which we have already covered, is the first choice and has been proven both in literature and experience to be effective in a majority of the cases. Levels 1 and 2 are considered alternative behavior procedures, while levels 3 and 4 are considered punishment procedures. So I would like to stress again that levels 2 through 4 should be designed and overseen by behavior specialists. This slide is just a reminder about the different consequences that can follow a behavior. Positive reinforcement is the process that strengthens the likelihood of a particular response by adding stimulus after the desired behavior is performed. It adds a consequence. And a negative reinforcement also strengthens the likelihood of that behavior happening again, but by removing an undesirable consequence. It removes the negative stimulus, and that is the consequence. So with our Simpsons example, Bart is receiving positive reinforcement by receiving a good grade, and then his mom is proud of him. The negative reinforcement is that the trash is taken out, which removes the smell from the house. Positive punishment works by presenting an adversive consequence after an undesirable behavior is exhibited, making the behavior less likely to happen in the future. For example, a student wipes his nose with his shirt during class, that's a behavior, and the teacher reprimanding him in front of his classmates is an adversive stimulus. Negative punishment happens when certain reinforcing stimulus is removed after a particular undesirable behavior is exhibited, resulting in the behavior happening less often in the future. For example, a child kicks a peer, that's the behavior, and then is removed from his favorite activity. That is the reinforcing stimulus that has been removed. And there are also examples on this slide of positive punishment and negative punishment in the forms of writing sentences, that's what's being added, or his skateboard being removed, and that is the stimulus being removed that is positive or desirable. Before we go any further into the lecture, take a brief moment to consider what are some of the common practices you have seen intended to be punishing for inappropriate behaviors. This can be in a school setting or at home or just in your community. What were they? And also, do you feel they were effective in reducing the problem behavior? Behavior reduction strategies within applied behavior analysis fall within a hierarchy of least intrusive to the most intrusive. And I just wanted to remind you that if you have a choice between two procedures that are equally effective, it is advisable to always use the least intrusive or the least adversive method. When considering the hierarchy of behavior reduction strategies, Level 1 and Level 2 are considered alternatives to punishment. Level 1, which is differential reinforcement strategies, consists of differential reinforcement of lower rates of behavior, of other behaviors, of incompatible behavior, of alternative behavior, and non-contingent reinforcement. Level 2, which is extinction, are considered alternatives to punishment, and we're going to go into that next. Then we will discuss why levels 3 and 4 are considered punishers. We are going to start with level 2, which is extinction, within the alternative to punishment category. What is extinction? Withholding reinforcement from a previously reinforced behavior decreases the rate of that behavior in the future. The removal of positive, negative, and automatic reinforcement causes the rate of that behavior to diminish. Extinction has been used in the classroom to decrease behaviors that are maintained by teacher attention. Often, it is used in conjunction with reinforcing other, more appropriate behaviors. So extinction is used with other differential reinforcement strategies, such as differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors. The behaviors addressed at that time by extinction can range from mild disruptions to aggressive and self-injurious behaviors. Sometimes people choose to follow the philosophy of just ignore it and it will go away, but that is often easier said than done. Early in ABA, there was a prevalent assumption that problem behavior is always maintained by attention. As a result, many behavior analysts relied on a procedural form of extinction or ignoring as a treatment for problem behavior. So, for example, ignoring a behavior that has an escape function would not work because the student wants to get out of doing the work. Additionally, in some cases, extinction is not appropriate in the classroom setting because of safety and property destruction concerns. Not everything can be ignored. The effectiveness of this method depends primarily on identifying and consistently withholding the reinforcer that has been maintained in the behavior, and this is not always possible in the classroom setting. Extinction reduces behavior by withholding or terminating the reinforcement that has been maintaining the inappropriate behavior. So how do we do that? What does that look like? You would determine what the reinforcement is for the behavior, and then you withhold it. You monitor the progress with data collection, and you have a plan in place of reactive procedures in FBA developed by the team already in place. There are different types of extinction, and it's not always maintained by attention. So there is tangible extinction, and that is where the student does not receive access to a desired item or activity. And there is escape extinction, where the student does not get to avoid or escape a non-preferred task or person. So here's some real-life examples of extinction. Screaming. A child screams during nap time because they want you to play soft music, but this is not always possible. So you used to plead with him to lay down and stop screaming, but now you give no response to the screaming. Crying and tantrums. Your student tantrums during a community-based instruction outing at the grocery store when she's ready to go back to school. You used to take her back to the bus and leave the grocery store when this happened, but now you stay at the store and continue working on the shopping skills. Extinction does not prevent the target behavior from occurring. Extinction terminates the response reinforcer relationship by changing the environment so that the behavior no longer produces reinforcement. Okay, so we are about to watch an example of extinction of behavior maintained by positive reinforcement. And remember that behaviors which are maintained by positive reinforcement are maintained by adding something. So those behaviors are placed on extinction when those behaviors no longer produce the reinforcement. In this video, we'll see an example of a family implementing extinction for crying and screaming at bedtime. In this case, the baby is using crying to get the parents' attention to disrupt the bedtime routine. Watch the effects of the extinction at the end of the video.
Mum and Dad have allowed Ryland's sleeping pattern to take over the entire family of an evening. This issue seriously needs to change because it's affecting everybody in the family dramatically. Jen and Bryce, we're going to use the sleep separation technique with Ryland to get him off to sleep, okay? And this is how it works. You come into the room, you keep calm, you read a nighttime story, kisses and cuddles, and so to bed, and you place Ryland into his crib. When you've done that, you move to this corner here and you sit down, like so. So he can see the side of your face, but you're not giving him eye contact. Each night, you move further and further away from the crib or bed so that you establish this pattern of your child feeling secure in their bed but not feeling anxious because they're left in their bedroom on their own. Do not, under any circumstances, as soon as you see him trying to climb over, get up from your spot and try and stop him. Okay. Because what you will do is find yourself fighting with your son in the crib like this to try and keep him down. And you can't control that. From wherever he's standing, he's not getting no communication or eye contact with you because that is what he's going to be looking for and that is what he's going to try and grab. And once he's got it, he won't stop.
Putting Ryland to bed takes hours. I'm usually just exhausted and nearly in tears. If this bedtime routine works out, it's gonna change everything.
Jen went to put Ryland to bed and had started to read stories to him. And then very quickly, he gave her signs that he wanted to go into the living room.
No sofa. Here. Lovely. Ryland's room. No, lovely. Prettier room. Kisses and cuddles. And into his crib. Ryland, it's time for night-night.
So Jen put Ryland in his crib, and he didn't want to go there.
Mom! Mom!
Say nothing, Jen.
Mom! Mom! Mom!
I started to kind of feel anxious about the routine when I had to bow my head and basically ignore him.
She's doing really well. Ryland decided to climb out of the crib. Jen went back into the crib. And he just went mad.
When Ryland was just crying, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy," it got to be too much at one point. I almost got up and grabbed him out of the crib.
Jen became very emotional and started to cry. Listening to her child call her name was just ripping her heart out.
Although it was only 25 minutes, it seemed like an hour.
Extinction burst. A common effect of the extinction procedure is a temporary increase in the frequency, the duration, and the magnitude of the target behavior. Therefore, it is critical to think through how bad an extinction burst can get before implementing this procedure. Problem behaviors can worsen during extinction before they get better. This has been the case in the times that I saw extinction implemented in the classroom setting. The extinction bursts were at such a strong magnitude that the student's safety as well as the safety of the other students became an issue. Property destruction increased to the point that computers and other electronic devices were damaged. As a result, attention was provided to the student, which provided reinforcement to that target behavior. And this led to strengthening the behavior rather than weakening it. Other times, it can be effective, like with the super nanny example we just looked at. Therefore, because extinction can be so problematic, it should be overseen by a behavior specialist and discussed at length by the team. The two remaining levels of the hierarchy, levels 3 and 4, contain options for behavior reduction that is considered punishment. A punishment signals or cues to the student that they will receive punishment by engaging in a specific behavior. The definition we are using here for punisher has 3 parts. First, it decreases the future rate or probability of the occurrence of that behavior. Second, it is administered contingently on the production of the undesirable behavior. And third, it is administered immediately following the production of the undesirable behavior. Any stimulus can be labeled a punisher if it results in the reduction of the target behavior. A punisher, like a reinforcer, can only be identified by how it affects the behavior, not by the nature of the consequent stimulus. So, for example, some students like high-quality verbal praise, a sticker, and high five. However, if the student starts to decrease the target behavior after receiving the high-quality praise, a sticker, and a high five, it is actually a punisher. So, the remaining levels 3 and 4 use punishment to change problem behavior. As we cover them, we will not go into how to implement them, but this is just an introduction for the purpose of awareness. The first punisher we will cover is removal of desirable stimuli. So what is the removal of desirable stimuli? This is also known as negative punishment, and remember that negative punishment occurs when something is removed as a consequence and the behavior decreases. The systems under the category of removing desirable stimuli we will cover are response cost procedures and timeouts. What is response cost procedures? Response costs can also be defined as the withdrawal of specific amounts of reinforcement contingent upon problem behavior occurring. So the reinforcements are removed in an attempt to reduce those problem behaviors. In order for this method to work, there already has to be some positive reinforcement available in the environment, and that provides the opportunity to withdraw it if the behavior occurs. By definition, the use of response costs results in desired behavior reduction, and that's why it is a punisher. Research has demonstrated that this technique is effective in a variety of settings. Now, I just want to talk briefly about the second line, which is some level of reinforcement must be available. We have to do preference assessments to find out what preferences are actually reinforcing, meaning that it will lead to an increase in the behavior. And we can't just think, oh, well, this will be reinforcing, or it would be reinforcing for me, so it would be reinforcing to the student. We have to systematically seek out reinforcements and keep it circulating and rotating, because people get tired of the same thing, and they may like something in the morning or like something different in the afternoon. So it's very important to systematically keep an appropriate list and access to true reinforcements for that student in order for this method to be effective. Additional questions when considering if the team wants to implement this procedure is: has more positive strategies been considered already? Is there access to reinforcers? And we just talked about that, how important that is. Have appropriate behavior and the results for inappropriate behavior been clearly explained to the students? Like, do the students know the rules? That's very important. Some students can understand that if it's just explained to them. Some students may need visuals, like on this board here. It has visuals showing what the appropriate and inappropriate behaviors are, and those are the rules. Has there been a, quote, fine defined? So the misbehavior ratio has been thought out. So for example, each time a student is out of their chair while they're supposed to be working, that results in the removal of 1 token. Can reinforcers be retrieved? And this is something that I've seen go tragic in the past, because the students get in a hole. They feel like they've lost so much of their tokens, or they're resentful that they have lost something that they've really worked for in another part of the day, and they feel like they can't get back to where they were, so why even try? So that's a real risk with these procedures. Will appropriate behavior be reinforced in conjunction with response cost? So again, referring back to this visual, it shows how they can earn their tokens as well as what will be taken away. And we want to make sure that the students never feel that they're in a hole, or that it's just useless to even try to do the right thing, to try to learn that replacement behavior, which will still give them access to reinforcement. Timeout procedures. Timeout procedures decrease problem behavior by denying the student for a fixed period of time the opportunity to receive reinforcement. So what it is, it's actually time out from positive reinforcement. And it's important that the student understands what the fixed period of time is that they're being removed. We can use visual timers or beepers, but it's important so that they know the time that they're serving in this timeout. There are 2 types of timeout. There's non-exclusionary timeout and there is exclusionary timeout. With non-exclusionary timeout, the student remains in the area or in the activity, but the teacher manipulates the environment so that the student is not able to access reinforcement at that time. There has been the use of timeout ribbons and contingent observation used a lot with this method. So with timeout ribbons, the student wears the ribbon while they're behaving appropriately, but then the ribbon is removed when they engage in the inappropriate behavior. While the ribbon is removed, they do not have access to the reinforcement, which could be teacher attention or engaging in an activity or with a specific tangible. When they are out of their timeout, they can have access to the teacher attention or to the tangible again. With contingent observation, the student is not removed from the activity, but they are moved to the edge of the activity so that they can still see the other students engaging appropriately with that activity and them being reinforced during that activity. So that's really rough. if that happens. So in this time, the student is not removed for either one of those, the ribbon or the contingent observation, but the environment is manipulated. The second type of timeout is exclusion from timeout, and that means that the student is removed from the activity, and that's how the reinforcement is denied. Under this category, there has been used timeout rooms, there's been seclusion, which means that the student is completely isolated, or facial or visual screens for more severe behaviors. And a facial screen can be something as simple as covering the student's eyes for a couple of seconds so that they can't see. It's important to document all timeout procedures, and also many of these methods are now against the law in many states, so it requires significant oversight and paperwork to be spotless with a behavior plan in order to implement these procedures. So that includes, like, even if you see somebody doing a facial screen with holding their hands over a student's eyes, that has to be documented in the behavior plan, and each occurrence needs to be documented in the appropriate paperwork for that district or that state. Okay, so level 4, we're starting level 4 now, which is presentation of adversive stimuli. There are two groups of unconditioned stimuli. There is unconditioned and conditioned. With unconditioned adversive stimuli, this results in pain or discomfort, and this is not appropriate in the classroom. The other form is conditioned stimuli, and that is where the student learns that an experience is aversive because it has been paired with unconditioned adversive stimuli. So, for example, a student learns that verbal reprimands are aversive. Adversive stimuli occurs when a student is introduced to a highly non-preferred stimulus in order to decrease a behavior. So what do we know about adversive stimuli? It stops the behavior immediately, and it differentiates between acceptable and non-acceptable behavior. Unconditioned stimuli result in physical pain or discomfort, and this can be anything that naturally causes pain, such as paddling or touching a hot stove. In the past, I have seen the use of contingent exercise and movement restraints used on students for behaviors such as not completing a task or tantruming where they threw instructional materials. Contingent exercise requires the student to engage in task-unrelated physical activity, such as push-ups, running laps, or knee bends. Personal restraint has been used also, and this is where the student's movement is suppressed by the application of force or pressure by a person upon the student, and this can take the form of holding a student's hands down or placing them in a basket hold. In some areas or some states, these punishers are completely against the law, or they require extensive documentation and a behavior intervention plan in order to implement them. So I would like to reiterate here that if you see any of these punishers in place, please ask to see the behavior intervention plan. Please ask to speak to the BCBA or the behavior specialist overseeing the case so that we can ensure that the student's civil rights are not being infringed upon.
Nothing. That's right. Because you know, deep down, you deserve to be punished. Don't you, Mr. Potter?
Okay, so we are wrapping up our section on adversive stimuli, but just to summarize, using spankings or other pain-inducing stimuli is adversive stimuli. Verbal reprimands or yelling at students is adversive stimuli. Using restraints on students is adversive stimuli. And as a result, the student may retaliate, withdraw, or engage in avoidance behavior. And that can put the student off entirely from the learning process. Additionally, it can be modeling bad behavior for the student. Another thing that is not considered is that just because somebody thinks something is punishing doesn't mean that it is. A reinforcer and a punisher is only defined by the behavior either increasing or decreasing after the use of that stimuli. So it can actually be reinforcing to the student instead of punishing. Personally speaking, punishers actually had the reverse effect on me. So in class, I would increase the behavior so that the teacher didn't win. If she thought she was punishing me, I felt like she was manipulating me, and that just encouraged me to do more of that behavior. So this is a real possibility in the school setting, and there is no coming back from a teacher losing the student's trust. The beginning of any teaching cycle starts with pairing with the student, letting the student know that you're reinforcing and that reinforcement is available through you. So if you tarnish that by punishing, you may have lost the student from that point moving forward. And there are always positive reinforcement strategies that have been proven to be more effective to use than these adversive stimuli. Restraint and seclusion is in level 4 punishment within the hierarchy, and restraint and seclusion is highly dangerous interventions that has led to death, injury, and trauma in children, and unfortunately, I have seen that occur. Another thing that needs to be taken into consideration with seclusion and restraint is that statistics and research continuously demonstrates that there is an inequitable distribution of the uses of these methods against minorities. So this is a very recent article that was released in Iowa, where they are still trying to make sure that there isn't inequitability within these methods. So it's still going on. It's still going on in real time, and that's why we need as many eyes as possible to ask to see the behavior plans, ask to speak to the behavior interventionists, so that the students' civil rights are not infringed upon. And again, this is illegal in many states because of the harm and the death that students have been subjected to. Overcorrection is the last level 4 punisher that we are going to cover. Overcorrection is a behavior reduction procedure that includes training an appropriate behavior. The inappropriate behavior is reduced through the exaggeration of experience. So there are two forms of overcorrection that is typically used. There is restitutional overcorrection and positive practice overcorrection. Restitutional overcorrection requires that the student restore or correct an environment that he or she has disturbed, not only to its original condition, but beyond that. So, for example, if a student had an accident during toilet training, he or she would be required to undress themselves, wash the clothes, dry the clothes, dress themselves again, and then clean the bathroom area. Positive practice overcorrection is when the student who engaged in an inappropriate behavior is required to engage in exaggerated or overly correct practice of the appropriate behavior. And I can remember a example of this from my childhood. One of my classes, the teacher felt that we lined up too slowly when it was time to transition out of the class. So we had to line up and sit down, line up and sit down, line up and sit down over and over again until we lined up the way she wanted us to, with a quiet voice and with our arms to our sides, and within the time frame that she felt that behavior should be performed in. So we are done with the punishers. And I hope that you have it drilled in to please ask questions, read the behavior plan, so that you can advocate and make sure that all of our children are safe. This is the end of the lecture, and I hope that you enjoyed it and you learned something new. The final thing that needs to be done is to answer participation questions so that you can earn your participation points, and that will be done on a platform called Lenoit. You will be provided with the link, and the next slide will explain how to use the platform for your questions. Okay, so once you make it to the Lenoit platform, you are going to answer 3 participation questions based on this video. When you click on the video, it will automatically play, and then the 3 questions that you need to answer will be on the board. So you can move the board around with the hand, grab it and move it around, and you can see on the lower right hand corner it shows you where you're navigating. So there's 3 questions here, and in order to answer the questions, you're going to go to this top right corner and pick one of these stickies to answer the questions. So let's say that you're going to answer question number 1. What is the systemic issues that you think existed? So you can grab a sticky and start out with your name, and then answer the question. and then post it, and then place your sticky near the question. I want to encourage you that if you see something that someone has said in the board that you really like or you want to keep discussing, go ahead and add a sticky, and let's use this as a real discussion board. Also, you have the option of finding other videos or pictures and posting it to it. So there's plenty of space here for us. So go ahead and answer all 3 questions so that we can come back and award your participation points. And remember to start out with your name.